Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly session titled Latest in Bitcoin Tech. And this week we will go through the Bitcoin Optech newsletter number 316, published on 16th of August 2024. We'll go through the preface of the newsletter before we dig into the actual content. This week's newsletter describes a new time warp that's particularly consequential for the new testnet 4, summarizes discussion about proposed mitigations for onion message denial of service concerns, seeks feedback on a proposal to allow LN payers to optionally identify themselves, and announces a major change to Bitcoin Core's build system that could affect downstream developers and integrators. Also included are our regular sections announcing new releases and release candidates and describing notable changes to popular Bitcoin infrastructure software. All right. So as every week, we will go through the news section, which has four news articles. We'll try and cover at least two or three, and then we'll move on to the other sections. All right. So the first one is about a time warp attack. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can connect my mouse. Yes, I can. Yeah, so the first one is the time warp attack. Okay, yeah, so any of the participants, either individually or can collaborate, or in your own words, would like to share what a time warp attack is, or what your understanding of a time warp attack is. What could it be? What do you understand from the name, or whatever you can recollect from the previous sessions?
Yeah, so I read an article before the session. I think I remember that you explained it in the previous session, but I don't know if I can recall the explanations. I'll make the attempt. So time warp is an exploit in Bitcoin, and why it happens is because Bitcoin consensus rules enforces that every block and the block header which has the timestamp should only have the minimum timestamp as the median of the past 11 blocks. So that is the minimum bound by which every block needs to be a valid block. And what having a hash rate greater than 51% allows miners to do is that they can change the uh, timestamp to a number which is just 1 second greater than the median time passed of the past 11 blocks. And if significant hash rate belongs to one entity, then what they can do is that they can create multiple blocks with that minimum time of just 1 second greater than the median time passed block and median time passed. And when the difficulty adjustment period epoch comes, which is every 2016 blocks, they can make an exploit. And how that exploit happens is that for any new 2016 difficulty adjustment period, when it begins, the first block will have the time, which can be technically in the last 2 weeks because of the median time pass block. So they can have the minimum time be the time during which the block was mined or validated minus the last 2 weeks. I'm sorry for being stuttery. I hope I'm making sense. And in the same block, in the same difficulty adjustment period, the latest block, which is the 2016th block, will have the current time. So what this does is that for the calculation of new difficulty during the next 2016 difficulty adjustment period, the average block time would become 20 minutes. This is how at least it will appear on those full nodes which are verifying those blocks. And what that does is that it will reduce the difficulty by half because the average block time by Bitcoin consensus rule is 10 minutes. And then the new difficulty adjustment period will have difficulty much lower. And this allows the miners to make this perpetual attack that now, because they can still use the same period to have the time of the first block in the next period be only 1 second greater, or sorry, 2 weeks in the past, and the last block in the current time. What that does it makes the average time even greater than 20 minutes. But yeah, this is my summary from the article that I read 2 hours before the session. Did that make sense? That it allows difficulty to be reduced, and over time it allows miners to produce blocks effectively at 1 block per second, which is the minimum rule for mining one block according to Bitcoin consensus rules. And yeah, this is the exploit. I'm not sure how it can be implemented and what are the protections that that are in place.
What is the math behind median time increasing by 1 minute per block, making making that 20 minutes per block in the end? How does that work out?
Yeah, that did confuse me. I'll just make one comment about what my understanding of it is. That if miners are able to, some miner or some entity is able to capture the majority of the hash rate, the first block in a difficulty adjustment period can they have a much they have very good probability of getting the first block, and they can showcase the time to be 2 weeks in the past by making the time stamp in the block header just 1 second greater than the median time pass block of the last 11 blocks. Was that the question? Can you repeat the questions? That I know.
Like to start off, I don't know what median time is.
Okay. I think the median time is that in the last 11 blocks from the chain tip, whatever the median time is, that according to the timestamps of the last 11 blocks, whichever block is the sixth block, is that how median time pass is calculated? I'm also a little lost here.
Would anybody else want to either validate what Shreyan said or add something to it or contest it?
Maybe I can share my screen to just explain the medium time pass concept.
Yeah, sure, great. In the meantime, Saurabh, I think you unmuted yourself if you want to say something by the time Bala sorts his screen.
Yeah, so my point was pretty similar that every block has to have a block time, and the freedom that the miners have is to choose any time between. I mean, there's no universal clock, so the freedom they can put up their own time, but the restriction being uh, on the one side, the restriction is the time has to be greater than the median time for the previous 11 blocks, so that we always kind of move forward, and the other restriction being it cannot be greater than t plus 2 hours, which is like the actual time in the computer. And the way difficulty adjustment readjusts itself is that the code is written in such a way that 2016 blocks are taken into account as to when the last 2016 average blocks were born, and if they were born with more than 10 minutes of delay on an average, then that means that the difficulty is pretty high and the difficulty level will come down. If they were born on an average less than 10 minutes away, as in the gap between two blocks is less than 10 minutes, then that means that difficulty level is less and like it will be increased. So miners have an incentive to decrease the difficulty level because then they can mine more blocks. And to decrease the difficulty level, all they have to signal is in 2016, the previous 2016 blocks on an average took more than 10 minutes. So how do they do that? How do they do that is, how do you sort of signal that the last 2016 blocks took more than 10 minutes is by taking the first few blocks and show that the timestamp on those blocks is less than the actual time. And like one of the final blocks, you can sort of make the timestamp a little more than the current time. And yeah, so that is what time warp attack is. What they do is the initial blocks that they mine, they try to put a previous time, a time in the past, because they have the ability to do that. They can choose a time which is just a little beyond the last 11 blocks median time. So yeah, I'm kind of summarizing what Shreyan has already mentioned, but that's what my understanding is.
All right, let's see what Bala has to say, and then we'll all together infer. We'll all add up all the answers and come up with the correct answer. And even the chat box is open. If anybody wants to chat, those people who joined us late, we are trying to understand what a time warp attack is. Whatever you know about what a time warp attack is, you want to summarize in your own words. Don't want to talk for whatever reason. Feel free to post your answers in the chat box. And for now, Bala is sharing his screen and explaining to us what a time warp attack is. Yes, Bala.
Yeah. So basically, there are a few rules that govern timestamps in your blog. So a blog's timestamp should not be lower than the median of the previous blocks, previous 11 blocks' timestamp. So that is the median pass time rule. So we'll see how it is calculated and all. And also the block's timestamp should not be greater than the node's network adjusted time plus 2 hours. So that is the future block time rule. So we have a lower limit and an upper limit. The time stamp should be on a block. So it's not arbitrary, and there are
Sorry,
and also
Bala, sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
So, when you said that the block which is found, its median time should be within what range? Bit, of the previous 11 blocks, right? How is that calculated? Calculated, and what is median time?
Yeah, I will just show you. So the blocks time, it's not the blocks median time, but whatever time that you as a block builder, as a miner, put in your block has a lower limit and an upper limit. So that is the limits, and the lower limit is called as the median pass time rule, and the upper limit is called as the future block time rule. So we'll see how it is calculated. So center of this is network adjusted time. The idea of network adjusted time, because we are in a decentralized distributed system, nobody keeps the clock for anybody else. So we'll have to infer the actual time is, and there is no right time, and nobody keeps the clock. So in that case, how do we calculate the time? So basically, as a node, you get timestamps in the version message that your peers communicate to you. So as you can see in the illustration, you get different timestamps from different nodes. So then you go about. So first you will have your own PCs or nodes time, so which is TC. And you will keep calculating the delta between yours and say you have n peers. You will
Sorry for intervening. Can you make it full screen?
okay. So yeah.
I think it's full screen. You have to zoom it.
Fixed.
I thought so.
Okay. So yeah, so you get the timestamps from different peers, and then you keep calculating the delta between your time and the peers' time, and then you sort this delta. So and from the sorted delta, you calculate the median. So so after getting the median, you calculate the network adjusted time. So the network adjusted time is whatever time you have on your node plus the median of the sorted delta TM. So this is the network adjusted time, and then you sort of check it whether your network adjusted time is too far away from your own clock's time. So if the network adjusted time related in this step is more than 70 minutes from your clock's time, then the network adjusted time is equal to your clock's time. Otherwise, if it is less than, then the network adjusted time is the final time that you sort of take it. Which means that if your network adjusted time that you calculated here is too far away, then you take you take your clock as the network adjusted time. So that's the basic behind the network adjusted time and how it is calculated. There are some many details about how do you go about calculating which peers to choose and all those things. So that is that, and some changes was made to it. So this network adjusted time is sort of spread out in various parts of the code. So so there were some changes made, peer changes made, and now network adjusted time is constrained to issuing warnings. Like if your node system time with respect to 10 hours open-ended. So so now what happens is that after the recent PRs, calculating the network adjusted time, you don't use it for a lot of things, but it is strictly confined to making some sort of warning. So in network adjusted times, and using this, how time warp attacks happen is that miners who control the majority hash rate can basically orchestrate a time warp attack. So the basic behind is that you sort of you as a miner or a group of miner, you collect 51% hash rates, and then you try time for the whole network. So so starting it, you can the end goal is to bring the difficulty down. So that attack does. So for example, if you can see here, this is epoch 1. A normal mining happens. So malicious miner basically enters into epoch 1. So this is from block 1 to block 2016. It's a 2-week time period. So after this epoch completes, basically the algorithm checks if a difficulty change is required. So after calculating the new difficulty using this formula, it comes to the conclusion that there is sort of no need for a difficulty change. But by now, the 51% attacker has taken control of 51% hash rate in epoch 1, but he doesn't start messing with the timestamps yet. So here he starts the attack. So so what he does is that what he does is that he sort of mines because he controls a lot of hash rate. He mines most of the blocks before block 2016 in a very short time span. And he mines the last block at the current time. Like within this 2016 block interval, the like say 2015 blocks are mined in a very short time span, and then he waits. And when the natural time for block 2016 comes up, he mines the block 2016. So what happens is that now the algorithm will go about calculating the difficulty, and it will find that there is too little hash. There is you have wrapped the time for the network. So according to the algorithm, it sort of infers that there is too little hash and there is irregularity in producing for every 10 minutes. That it revises the difficulty down. So this sort of gives you a plot. So this is the block number. It's for that particular epoch that we are interested in. So this is 0th block, and you have 2016 block here. So you can see the timestamp. So the miner starts putting timestamps very close together. Typically, your timestamp should go like this, but because he controls the hash rate, he will sort of put timestamps closer. Sorry. So he'll sort of put timestamps closer, and as the 2016 block reaches, he'll put the actual time that is supposed to go into a 2016 block. So now you can see time algorithm, the time getting wrapped. So this is called as a time wrap phenomenon. So as the time gets wrapped, now the algorithm sees that there is a disconnect or disjoint in producing blocks every 10 minutes. So here also blocks are not produced in every 10 minutes, and here also blocks are not produced in every 10 minutes. So the difficulty rule kicks in. So how does the algorithm infer? It infers only through this difficulty adjustment formula that it uses. So basically, it takes the last mine block's time, and this is the first mine block's time, and then subtracts it and divides it by 60. So because of this, it sort of infers that there is a need for a difficulty downward and the target goes up. So the minor success a difficulty. So this is what time graph is.
Right, thanks a lot, Bala, for sharing your screen and giving that elaborate explanation. Anybody else before we try and summarize everybody's answers? Nobody? Okay, all right. One correction in your presentation, Bala. The network adjusted time is no longer calculated based on querying peers. That was what used to happen early, that a node used to query 200 of their first inbound peers and then ask them for their network adjusted time and then keep a track of the delta and then use the median time of those 200 peers to determine what the network adjusted time of the node is. Right now, what happens is that the node only looks at its local time. So if you're running a node on your computer's local time is your node network adjusted time. Okay, that is one change. And I think Mango just left. I wanted to tell him what the median time passed is. I hope everybody else here knows what median time passed is. So I'll just summarize just in case if somebody's not aware of what median time is. So basically, if I give you a set of elements and I tell you to find the average of those elements, okay, what you do is that you do the sum of all the elements and then you divide them by the number of elements. So if I give you 10 numbers and I tell you find the average of these 10 numbers, you will add all those 10 numbers and then divide them by 10. That is the average. That's how you find the average. How do you find the mean? You find the mean by just finding the value that is at middle. Okay, that is at the middle. So if I give you 11 blocks and I tell you find the median time of these 11 blocks, it means the time of the block which is at the middle. That is the sixth block. So that is what median is. So if I give you 11 elements and I tell you find me the timestamp of the median element, then the median element is the one that is at the middle. That's the sixth. So when we say median time passed, it means that timestamp of the sixth block. So in Bitcoin, a block is valid only if the timestamp is greater than the median time passed of the previous 11 blocks, meaning it should be greater than the sixth block that was mined before this current block that is under evaluation. And the upper bound is your network adjusted time, that is your computer's local time plus 2 hours. That is the lower bound and the upper bound. Okay, now coming to time warp attack. What is time warp attack? The time warp attack is described here. So Mark Hart posted to Delving Bitcoin to describe an attack discovered by developer Zavi for exploiting testnet4's new difficulty adjustment algorithm. Testnet4 applied a solution from the consensus cleanup softfork for mainnet that is intended to block the time warp attack. However, Zavi described an attack similar to time warp attack that could be used even with the new rule to reduce mining difficulty to 1/16th its normal value, or had extended Zavi's attack to allow reducing difficulty to its minimum value. We describe several related attacks in simplified form below. So firstly, time warp attack already existed. And like all of you are described, we'll again go through what is the classic time warp attack. It has existed for quite some time. It was mitigated recently in testnet 4. Okay, pulling off a time warp attack on the mainnet requires 51% hash rate. Like one single entity should control 51% of hash rate, and they should act malicious for a time period of a lot of weeks. So pulling it off on the mainnet is very difficult. Some people say it's infeasible. Don't know how infeasible it is in today's world because the hash rate is getting more and more consolidated with every day. So I don't know how infeasible it is. But it obviously and definitely is difficult to pull off on the mainnet. But on testnet, it's possible. On testnet, it's possible for somebody to acquire 51% of the hash rate. So that is why we had to move this testnet 4 because testnet 3 was time warped and the difficulty of testnet 3 was reduced to the minimum and also the block reward was negligible. And that is why we went to testnet 4. And when we went to testnet 4, we solved this time warp attack. How did we solve it? We covered this in the previous sessions and we'll also try and go through it again in brief in this session. But now we've come with the new variant. Even though we solved the time warp attack that we've known for years, and when we moved from testnet 3 to testnet 4, we solved that time warp attack to ensure that that time warp attack does not affect testnet 4's difficulty. But now there's a new variant of time warp attack uh, that has been discovered, which even testnet 4 is immune to. New variant of it. Okay. So Bitcoin blocks are stochastically with the difficulty intended to retarget. Bitcoin blocks are produced stochastically with the difficulty intended to retarget every 2016 blocks to keep the average time between blocks at about 10 minutes. The following simplified illustration shows what is supposed to happen with a constant rate of block production given the retarget every 5 blocks. Okay, so for the sake of ease of understanding, generally a difficulty adjustment period is 2016 blocks, but for the sake of understanding in this example, the author has reduced it to 5. So let us assume for the sake of simplification that a difficulty adjustment period is not of 2016 blocks, but it's of 5 blocks. So this is period 1 in black, this is period 2 in gray, this is period 3 in blue, and this is period 4 in orange. A dishonest miner or cabal of miners possessing slightly more than 50% of hash rate can censor blocks produced by other slightly less than 50% of honest miners that would naturally lead initially to only one block being produced every 20 minutes on average. After 2016 blocks are produced, using this pattern, difficulty will adjust to a half its original value to return the rate of blocks being added to the main chain to one block every 10 minutes on average. So this example here is in context to testnet. It cannot take more than 20 minutes on the testnet for a block to be mined, and we've covered this in preceding sessions. The testnet is configured in such a way that if a block is not found on the testnet for 20 minutes, then the difficulty of the testnet reduces down to 1. Reason, if the difficulty goes up, it becomes difficult for developers to mine blocks. The purpose of the testnet gets defeated. So you don't want the difficulty of testnet to go very high, and you don't want testnet, like you don't want the developers to wait for an hour or 70 minutes or 90 minutes for a block to be mined on the testnet, right? Because that defeats the purpose of having a testnet. And that is why the testnet is configured in such a way that if in 20 minutes a block is not mined on testnet, the difficulty reduces to 1, and after that immediately a block gets mined. So if a miner has 51% of the hash rate, the maximum they can do is that they can delay a block up till 20 minutes. And by doing that, what will happen is that they'll increase the difficulty, they'll reduce the difficulty by half. Okay, because on an average we expect a block to be mined on 10 minutes, but because I have 51% of the hash rate, I will put the timestamp 20 minutes in the future, and by doing that, I will increase the amount of time that it takes to mine a block as per the timestamps. The difficulty has actually not increased, but I'm just manipulating the timestamps. And every time I mine a block, I put a timestamp 20 minutes in the future. After 2016 blocks, what happens is that it takes twice the amount of time for me to mine 2016 blocks. Instead of 2 weeks, it takes 4 weeks, because instead of 10 minutes, I'm mining a block every 20 minutes. So the difficulty will reduce into half. Okay, so this is a 51% attack, or what you can call that a miner can reduce the difficulty of. This is not a 51% attack. In fact, this is a this is a 51% attack. Okay, so if a miner has 51% of the hash rate, okay, what he can do is in this time period, it can mine a block every 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and after that the difficulty reduces to half. So a miner that has 50% of the hash rate can reduce the difficulty of the testnet by a half, merely by manipulating the timestamps and putting the timestamps 20 minutes in the future every time he mines a block. This is a 51% attack. Okay. Now, what's a classic time warp attack? A time warp attack occurs when the dishonest miners use their hash rate majority to force the timestamps in most blocks to use the minimum allowed time. And a lot of you talked about this. Shreyan talked about it. Bara talked about it. Even Saurabh talked about it, about the minimum time, right? At the end of each 2016 block target period, they increased the block header time to the current wall time, to make it seem like it took longer to produce the blocks than it actually did, leading to a lower difficulty in the subsequent period. Okay. Now, how does this happen? So these are the initial blocks. Okay, we are assuming that our difficulty adjustment period is of 5 blocks. Okay, so instead of 2016, the 2016 block is our fifth block. So the first block the miner will mine. The second block will be 1 second in the future. Third block 1 second in the future. Fourth block 1 second in the future. The fifth block will be current time plus 2 hours. Okay. Now when we go to the second difficulty adjustment period, which is in gray color, the first block which will be mined needs to have a timestamp which is greater by at least 1 second than the timestamp of block one, right? Because we're talking about median time pass of the past 11 blocks, which means that the timestamp of block number n should be 1 second greater than the timestamp of block number n minus 6, right? So the timestamp of block number 6 here should be 1 second greater than the timestamp of block number 1. The timestamp of 7 should be 1 second greater than 2. The timestamp of 8 should be 1 second greater than 4. And the timestamp 3, sorry, and the timestamp of 9 should be 1 second greater than 4. Even the second difficulty adjustment period, the miner does the same thing, increases by 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. But for the final block, what it does is it again uses the current difficulty adjustment algorithm, the current time plus 2 hours. Okay. So in the first period, the miner will not be able to make any changes. Okay. Because in the first period, how do you calculate the difficulty adjustment? Okay, you take the time of the first block and you take the time of the last block. Okay, so that is you take the timestamp of the block number 1 and you take the timestamp of block number 5, and then you see how much time did it take to mine these blocks. Okay, so in the first difficulty adjustment period, the time is normal. Okay, but the effect will take place in the second difficulty adjustment period. Okay, because this timestamp 6 is 2 weeks in the past. Okay, and this timestamp is current time plus 2 hours. Okay, so generally a difficulty adjustment epoch gets over in 2 weeks, but here it'll get over in 4 weeks. Okay, because it starts at 6 is 1 second ahead of 1. Okay, so it took 2 weeks for us to go from 1 to 5. It means that 1 started 2 weeks ago, and the timestamp of 6 is 1 second greater than 1, which means the timestamp of 6 is 2 weeks ago, and this timestamp of 10 is current time plus 2 hours. Okay, so this is going to be 4 weeks. So the time taken to mine block number 6 to block number 10 will be 4 weeks, because we manipulated the difficulty, and that is why in the next time epoch, the blue one, the difficulty will get reduced by 50%, and then again you do the same thing. You start with 11, 12, 13, 14, and again with 15 you increase it. So again it will go down by 50%, and then you keep doing that, and with every difficulty adjustment period the time gets reduced by 50%. This is what a classic time warp attack is, that you manipulate the fact that you have 51% of the hash power and you increase the timestamp only by 1 second in every difficulty adjustment period, and the final block has the current timestamp plus 2 hours, which makes the difficulty adjustment algorithm believe that it took 4 weeks to mine 2016 blocks instead of 2 weeks, and with every difficulty adjustment period, or with every 2016 blocks that are mined, the difficulty gets reduced by 50%. Okay, I'll go through an example because some time ago I had answered this question on Stack Exchange, so this example will help us understand better. Okay, so this is the first difficulty adjustment algorithm period, block number 1 to block number 206, and this is the second one, 2017. Okay, so the timestamp of 2017 should be 1 second greater than 2011. Okay, and the timestamp of 2018 should be 1 second greater than 2012, and 219 should be 1 second greater than 213. Okay, that is how we do this. The MTP plus 1. So initially we'll increase it by 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. The final one, boom, current time plus 2 hours. Next again we do 1 second. What 1 second? What? Not 1 second ahead of 2016. 1 second ahead of 2011. Because if this is the nth block, then this is the n minus 6th block. Okay, so this is the median time for this block. So block number 2017 should have a timestamp which is 1 second greater than 2011, and 2011 has a timestamp of 2 weeks in the past. So 2017 will also have the timestamp of 2 weeks in the past, because it has to increment only by 1 second. Whereas this block 4032 is current time. Okay, current time plus 2 hours. So the difficulty adjustment algorithm will assume that block number 2017 was mined 4 weeks ago, and this block was mined today, current time. So in the next difficulty adjustment period, 4033 onwards, the difficulty will get reduced by 50%. That is what a classic time warp attack is. So I hope we were able to cover to begin with what a classic time warp attack is, how we've known it so far. Any questions pertaining this before we move on to the new variant?
Just one question. I remember in the article linked to the newsletters, which mentions time of attack, it says that after the first difficulty adjustment period, you can reduce the difficulty further by making the average time 25 minutes. So there are a lot of questions. I mean, we can cover this separately sometime. I can ask those questions. But yeah, that one point was definitely very interesting. I think it's, yeah, if you can just scroll.
So I will. I made my notes, okay, and those notes are very easy to understand. And even I've given examples. I'll share this link of this answer that I gave on Stack Exchange. I think this is the easiest content that you'll find because I went through multiple articles and I simplified it for myself some time ago, and then I saw this question, so I answered it.
Nice.
So I will share the link.
Yep, thanks. But yeah, just one clarification also that the median time pass is the block time of the sixth block, right? In the past, as in n minus
Yes.
6. The current change
Yes.
tip is, right?
Yes. So if the block under evaluation is 2017, then the MTP for it is the time of 2011. So 2017 needs to have a timestamp which is at least 1 second greater than 2011. And like that, 2018 should have 1 second greater than 2012, like that. And in this example, we can see that 6 should have a timestamp greater 1 second greater than 1. 7 should have timestamp 1 second greater than 2. 8 should have a timestamp 1 second greater than 3. 9 should have a timestamp 1 second greater than 4. And then 10 should have a timestamp 1 second greater than 5. Okay. So how was this is the time of attack that we've known. We've tried and simplified it as much as I can, as we could have. I hope it's clear and elaborate to everyone. Let's read further. The new rule applied to testnet 4 fixes this by preventing the first block in a new retarget period from having a timestamp much earlier than its previous block, the last block in the previous period. Okay, so this is the classic time warp attack that we've all known. This was existing in testnet 3. It's been mitigated in testnet 4. I think it'll get mitigated in testnet on the mainnet as well when the next version of Bitcoin Core gets released. Okay, how is this mitigated? It's very simple. The first block in a difficulty adjustment epoch needs to have a timestamp greater, not greater, needs to have a timestamp which cannot be lesser than 600 seconds as compared to the timestamp of the last block in the previous difficulty adjustment period. Okay, now let's simplify that. 5 is the last block of the first difficulty adjustment period, right? 6 is the first block of the next difficulty adjustment period. So 6 cannot have a timestamp which is lesser than 600 seconds as compared to the timestamp of 5. So if the timestamp of 5 is n, the timestamp of 6 cannot be lesser than n minus 600. And 600 here, I mean seconds. So the timestamp of this block, the first block of a difficulty adjustment period, cannot be less than 10 minutes the timestamp of the last block of the first difficulty adjustment period. Okay, currently what we are doing is, how is the time warp attack being exploited? Okay, the timestamp of 6 is 2 weeks before the timestamp of 5. Okay, because 6 needs to have a timestamp of just 1 second greater than 1. 1 occurred 2 weeks ago, so 6 can have a timestamp which is 2 weeks behind in time, and still it would be valid. Okay, so 5 is current time and 6 is 2 weeks behind. How do we fix this? We fix this to ensure that 6 cannot have a time which is less than 10 minutes the time of 5. So now 6 cannot go 2 weeks behind. So when we have 5, 6 cannot have a timestamp which is lesser than 600 seconds of 5. 11 cannot have a timestamp less than 600 seconds as compared to the time of 10. And 16 cannot have a timestamp which is less than 600 seconds as compared to 15. So you can see here in the diagram. Okay, so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4 and 5. 6 comes up along with 5. It can be with 5. It can be maximum 10 minutes before 5. Okay, if we take 6 from here and put it here, it becomes invalid. Earlier what we were doing is 6 is here. Now we made a condition 6 cannot be here. 6 has to be with 5, ahead of 5, and even if 6 is behind 5, maximum 10 minutes, not more than that. So you can see 6 is here. If I take 6 from here and I put it over here, 6 becomes invalid. Same goes for 11. 11 cannot have a timestamp lesser than 10 minutes, the timestamp of 10. So if I take 11 and put it here, like we've done here, see, we take 11 and put it here. But here 11 is over here. If I take 11 and I put it here, 11 becomes invalid. So the timestamp of 11 has to be either equal to or greater, or it cannot be less than 10 minutes as compared to 10. Okay, and so on and so forth. That is how we keep on doing. All right, so this is how we mitigated the timestamp attack. The classic timestamp attack in testnet 4 was mitigated like this by bringing in a clause that the first block in any difficulty adjustment period cannot have a timestamp which is less than 600 seconds as compared to the timestamp of the last block in the previous difficulty adjustment period. So is this understood, or any questions pertaining to this? How did we fix the classic time warp attack before we go on to the new variant? Would anybody like to summarize? Because I don't think we'll be able to cover anything other than time warp attacks. We've got 12-15 minutes with us.
Parallel, a question. This is the proposed change, and earlier one was the how blocks were created in testnet, right?
Okay. So this is the exploit. This is the attack. Okay, this one. This is the fix. The fix that we already have. This was the attack that was happening in testnet 3. This is the fix that we made. In testnet 3, you can see 6 was before 5, 11 was before 10, 16 was before 15. Okay, now we made a condition that 6 cannot be before 5, 11 cannot be before 10, and where did it go? 11 cannot be before 10, and
has to be
16 cannot be before 15. Okay, so we fixed this. Okay, everything was hunky and dory, and we moved on to testnet 4. Now, after fixing this, a new exploit has come, a new type of classic time, or a new variant of time warp attack has come, which can even bypass this fix that we'll discuss now. But the question was, is this up till here? Is it clear that how did we fix the classic or the old time warp attack when we moved on to testnet 4?
Faisal, just one basic question: that why is there such a huge gap between 4 and 5? What's the reason for that?
Because okay, I have a timestamp of 1. I incremented by 1 second, then incremented by 1 second, then incremented by 1 second. 5 is the last block, so I have to put the current time. That is what the time warp attack is, right? All the initial blocks, you increase the time by 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second till you reach the final block. When you reach the final block, you put the current time plus 2. Okay. Generally, a difficulty adjustment period is 2016, but here, for the sake of convenience, they have assumed that the difficulty adjustment period is of 5 blocks. So this 5 is equivalent to 2016.
Right.
Faisal, in the new solution that was proposed, can you go at the below diagram that was the restriction was there when the sixth block shouldn't
it's
be.
this. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's this. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this, still the 10 block is put in at a very far end compared to the 9 block that was there. So by implementing this, the effect that the classic wrap attack has, it in every epoch, it is decreasing the difficulty by 1/2. But by implementing this, still the difficulty can be decreased, but it can't be. Yeah, we are putting a limit on to the decreasing of the difficulty. Is that the solution is trying to do?
No, with this solution, you cannot pull off a time warp attack at all. Okay, this one, we're not talking about the new variant. This is the time warp attack that we've discussed, and this is the solution. Once you apply this solution, you cannot pull off a time warp attack at all. How is difficulty calculated in Bitcoin? Whatever happens in the middle is irrelevant. Okay, when your difficulty adjustment algorithm is calculating the difficulty of the network, it takes into consideration only two things: the timestamp on the first block of the difficulty adjustment period and the last block. Whatever happens in the middle, it is not concerned. Okay, so when your algorithm is calculating difficulty, it does not care what is the timestamp of 2, does not care the timestamp of 3, does not care what the timestamp of 4 is. It will only look at 1, it will only look at 5. Okay, if 5 took 2 weeks after 1, that's it. So if one block was mined today and fifth block was mined 2 weeks after today, it doesn't care what happened with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It could be anything. For it, everything is hunky and dory. Okay. If the amount of time taken for you to reach from block 1 to block 5 is 2 weeks, then there will be no difficulty adjustment. It will assume that it took 10 minutes to take all the blocks into it took 10 minutes to mine each block. Okay, so the difficulty adjustment algorithm doesn't look at 2, doesn't look at 3, doesn't look at 4. It only looks at 1 and 5. Here it only looks at 6 and 10. You can see the time taken between 6 and 10 is fine, 2 weeks, right? The amount of time taken between 1 and 5 is the same as the amount of time taken between 6 and 10. Whatever happens to 7, 8, 9 is irrelevant. The algorithm will not even look at 7, at 8, at 9. Okay, 7, 8, 9 just need to follow that thumb rule that the timestamp of 7, 8, and 9 should not be less than the MTP of the previous 11 blocks, and it should not be greater than the current timestamp plus 2 hours. Other than that, they are not taken into consideration for difficulty adjustment. Same here, it will only consider block number 10 and block number 11 and block number 15, block number 16 and block number 20. And if you look at this, okay, the amount of time taken to go from 1 to 5 is the same as 6 to 10, is the same as 11 to 15, is the same as 16 to 20. So we have solved. Whatever happens in the middle, difficulty adjustment algorithm is not concerned about it. As long as the first and the last block take 2 weeks, then everything is fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah. Somebody would like to summarize how this one fixes? Yeah, somebody wants to talk.
No, I was just making a different point that I think a tangential point that I think that's also why it's difficult to pull off, because as soon as somebody will be able to notice that there is a discrepancy between the middle blocks and the last blocks, like in this attack shown that 7, 8, 9 have the timestamp which is way in the past compared to even block 6. So it will be easily identifiable after maybe 1 or 2 difficulty adjustment periods.
So generally how this happens is like a person might even ask a question, okay, like all of us look at mempool.space, or some of us even mine, right? So generally, if somebody is artificially manipulating the timestamps, will people not get to know? Like, okay, just now let's assume we go to mempool.space and we see the latest block, and we see that the timestamp of the latest block is 2 weeks in the past. Then another block gets mined by the same miner, again 2 weeks in the past. Another block gets mined by the same miner 2 weeks in the past. Will people not start suspecting after 3, 4, 5, 10 blocks? And will there not be a chaos in the Bitcoin community that somebody with 51% hash rate is trying to pull off a time warp attack? What do you all think? Because it's obvious, right? Your timestamp is on the blockchain. So if you see a miner X just mined a block and put a timestamp of 2 weeks in the past, and the miner X again mined another block, and that miner has 51% hash rate, and the miner is mining blocks after blocks after blocks, and all blocks have timestamps of 2 weeks in the past. Within 1 hour or maximum 2 hours, this news will create chaos everywhere, right? So how do you think it's possible for a miner to do this and not let anybody know? How can he last for so long, for weeks and weeks, for 2 weeks or 4 weeks doing that, and nobody notices that for 4 weeks one single miner is mining block after block after block, and the miner is putting timestamps which are 2 weeks in the past? What do you all think would be the reason that nobody gets to know, and the miner is doing that for 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
My guess is that it is not possible, but I would love to know if it is.
So the miner will mine parallelly, it will not broadcast its chain. Miner will keep mining, but it will not share its blocks with the network. Miner will mine for 2 weeks, okay, and it will not share its block with the network. It will keep the blocks private. After 2 weeks, all of a sudden the miner will share all the blocks together. And now, because there are two competing chains, right? One chain is the normal chain that the whole world has been on since the past 2 weeks, when this miner was mining parallelly and not sharing his blocks for 2 weeks. The rest of the world was mining on a certain chain. Now, after 2 weeks, this miner has decided to broadcast his chain, which was unbroadcasted for the past 2 weeks. All of a sudden, he broadcasts the entire chain. Now we have two competing chains. Now, because this miner has 51% of the hash rate, the nodes will follow its chain and abandon the chain on which they have been for the past 2 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So the miner will not mine block number 7 and broadcast it, then block number 8 and broadcast it, then block number 9 broadcast it. No, people will recognize, right? This fellow is mining blocks and putting timestamps which are 2 weeks in the past, and this fellow has 51% hash rate, because today everything is very transparent. Like, we know exactly which mining pool has how much of hash rate. So if one single mining pool or a bunch of mining pools have a hash rate of 51%, and they're mining blocks and they're broadcasting blocks after blocks with 2 weeks, with a timestamp 2 weeks in the past, everybody will get to know, and people will start taking measures to combat that. So how this happens is that this miner will broadcast will mine block number 7, 8, 9, everything he'll mine broadcast till 20, but he mine till 20, but he'll not broadcast them. Okay, he'll keep them private. He'll not broadcast it to the network. All of a sudden, when the time is right, when he has reduced the difficulty by 50% or by two-thirds, then he'll all of a sudden broadcast it. And now we have two competing chains. One chain on which the world has been for the past 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and one chain that the miner had kept in private and now has broadcasted. Now there are two competing chains. Now which chain will the nodes follow? The nodes will obviously follow the chain that has no proof of work. Now this fellow has been mining in private and he has 51% of the hash rate. So when he broadcasts his malicious chain, the nodes will follow that chain because that has no proof of work, and the chain on which the world was for so many weeks, since this guy had kept his chain private, will now get reorged, and all the transactions in that block will get reorged. So that is how generally this such attacks are pulled off. The time warp attacks are pulled off, or the double spend attacks are pulled off. Miners don't broadcast every single block. Okay, they broadcast and they keep it private, and when the time is right, then they broadcast it. There are various attacks like selfish mining attack, and time warp attack and double spend attack. In these attacks, the miners don't broadcast each and every block when it is beneficial for them to broadcast. When it is not possible for people to circumvent their attack, then they will broadcast. Theoretically, practically, this has never happened, but theoretically, if they were to do, they would do it in this way. Okay, so this is how we solve the time warp attack. In the next 10 minutes, we'll try and cover the new variant of time warp attack and see how we fix that.
What is selfish mining? Is it related to this?
Not related to this. In short, selfish mining is basically selfish mining is you trying to harm other miners. Okay, so if let's say you have a good amount of hash rate, you have 35% of hash rate, you found a block. You will not broadcast that block. Okay, you will let other miners keep working on that block. Okay, and keep working on that block. Now, let's say that you found another block. So you have two blocks, but you don't broadcast it. When you have two blocks, then you broadcast them all of a sudden together. What that will do is that it will waste the resources of other miners. Because the moment you find the block and you broadcast it, all the miners on the network will get to know that you have found a block. So they will stop working on that block, right? They will stop working on the transactions which are on that block. They'll create a new candidate block with new transactions and start working again, right? So a miner finds a block, miner broadcasts it. When the miner broadcasts it, all the other miners get to know that, hey, such and such miner has found a block. Now there's no point working on the transactions that are already in that block. Okay, so they'll create a new block with new transaction and start working on it. But you want your competitors to waste their resources. So you found a block, but you will not broadcast it. You will let them waste their resources by mining a block that includes transaction which you have already mined. So they are just wasting their resources. They don't know. You've not informed them yet that, hey, I found a block. They're wasting their resources. And because you have 35-40% of the hash rate, you are very sure that you'll find the next block as well. So you find two blocks, and after that you broadcast both the blocks together, for example. What will happen is that this will delay your broadcast. You could have broadcasted the block immediately when you found a block, but you decided to delay it by 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And in that 10 minutes or 20 minutes, your competitors are just wasting time and resources and money mining a block or trying to find a block which has transactions which you have already mined. So what you do is you mine a block, but you don't broadcast it. You allow your competitors to work on transactions which you have already successfully mined in the block. So they don't know that you mined a block. They're just wasting their resources, and then you delay broadcasting that block, so they get that information later on. And in the meantime, they end up wasting their bandwidth and their electricity and everything, and thousands of US dollars in hashing. That's what a selfish mining attack is.
Yep. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So we'll wrap it up with the mitigation. Okay. So, like the original time warp attack, Ohad's version of Zawi's attack increments most blocks headers time by the bare minimum. However, for 2 of every 3 retarget periods, it jumps forward the time for the final block in a period and the first block in the subsequent period. This decreases difficulty by the maximum allowed each period 1/4 current value. For the third period, it uses the lowest time allowed for all blocks plus the first block of the subsequent period, which increases difficulty by the maximum value 4x. In other words, the difficulty increases by 1/4, then difficulty decreases by 1/4, decreases again by 1/16, and then increases to 1/4 of its original value. So what is the new time warp attack? From here to here is the same. 1 to 5 is the same. Okay, I mine block number 1. I increment by 1 second, increment by 1 second, increment by 1 second, and then I increment by. Then I mine the last block and I add its timestamp as current time plus 2 hours. Okay. Now we've already fixed this that block number 6 cannot have a time stamp which is 600 seconds before 5. Okay, so the attacker cannot manipulate with 6. Okay, the 6 will be there only, but it manipulates 7, it manipulates 8, it manipulates 9. Then again 10, it comes back to its original position. It cannot manipulate 11, it manipulates 12, it manipulates 13, it manipulates 14 and 15. 16 it cannot play with. Again 17, 19, 17, 18, 19, and 20 at the normal time. Now what this does is that the 3-period cycle can be repeated indefinitely to reduce difficulty by 1/4 each cycle, eventually reducing it to a level that allows miners to produce 6 blocks per second. To reduce difficulty by 1/4 in a retarget period, the attacking miners need to set the time of the retarget blocks to 8 weeks further in the future than the block at the start of the current period. How this attack works is, okay, the timestamp of the last block in a difficulty adjustment period will be set 8 weeks in the future. Okay, up till now, what we were doing is we were setting the timestamp to be what current time plus 2 hours. Okay, so year 5 was what current time plus 2 hours. Here I start block number 1, block number 2, 1 second increase, number 3, 1 second increase, number 4, 1 second increase. I go to 5, I put the timestamp of 5 8 weeks in the future. 8 weeks in the future. So the difficulty adjustment algorithm will assume that it took 8 weeks to mine this block, these 5 blocks, and what will happen? It will decrease the difficulty by 1/4. I will do the same with the next difficulty adjustment algorithm. Okay, so 6 will be 600 seconds minus 5. Okay, then again 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. When I reach 10, the difficulty or the timestamp of 10 will be again 8 weeks in advance, 8 weeks ahead of 5. Okay, again I'll increase it by again I'll decrease it by 1/4, so it becomes 116. And then for the next difficulty adjustment algorithm, I'll put it back to normal, so it'll get increased by 1/4. Okay, and then it'll come back to its original value. It'll increase by 4x and then it'll come back to its original value 1/4. Okay, now let's try and understand this in 5 minutes. The first question that I have for everyone is, here what we were doing is 5 had a current timestamp, had a timestamp of current plus 2 hours. Okay, it was valid. We know that any block that has a timestamp of current plus 2 hours is valid, and any block that has a timestamp of current plus 3 hours plus 4 hours is invalid. But here what the attacker is doing is that it is putting the timestamp in the last block of the difficulty adjustment epoch to current time plus 8 weeks. Current time plus 8 weeks. How is that possible? More than 2 hours, a block gets rejected. How is he putting 8 weeks? Any idea, any random guess? Where do you need to go? 8 weeks further in the future. So the timestamp of 5 is 8 weeks in the future. The timestamp of 10 is 8 weeks in the future. Are you all there or everybody left? Oh, okay, are there. Any guesses? How is that possible? Or if it's not possible, just say it's not possible. If you think it's not possible.
Yeah, I can just imagine that there's some consensus sought for proposal, right? Is there some change in consensus that is the part of the reason?
No, the catch is, as I told you, the miner will put a timestamp that is 8 weeks in the future, but the miner will not broadcast it till 8 weeks.
Oh, right. Right, yes.
And when it's 8 weeks, that 8 week timestamp becomes current time. Okay, so the timestamp of 1 is 8 weeks in the past, and when I broadcast, the timestamp of 5 is current time. Right? When I mine 5, the timestamp is 8 weeks in the future, but I will not broadcast my chain for 8 weeks. I'll wait for 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, I'll broadcast my chain. And at that time, this time will be current plus 2 hours, and this will be 8 weeks in the past. So the difficulty adjustment algorithm will assume that it took 8 weeks for me to go from 1 to 5, whereas it should take only 2 weeks. What will happen? It will decrease the difficulty by 1/4. I'll do it again and not broadcast my chain for 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, again I'll broadcast. Again, the difficulty adjustment algorithm will think that it took me 8 weeks to go from 5 to 10. And then again, it will reduce the difficulty by 1/6. Okay. And for the next time epoch, I'll keep it normal. So the difficulty will decrease by 4x, and it'll go back to 1/4. So I can keep on doing that, decrease by 1/4, decrease by 116, bring it back to 1/4, then again take it to 116, and again reduce it by 1/4, and I can keep on doing that till I reach a second where the difficulty will be so less that I'll be able to mine 6 blocks per second. So this time warp attack was understood.
Yes.
All right, let's see how they mitigated it. So Ohad suggests solving the attack with a soft fork that requires the timestamp of the last block in a retarget period to be greater than the timestamp of the first block in that period. Zavi proposed several solutions, including forbidding block timestamps from decreasing, or at least forbidding them from decreasing more than about 2 hours. Okay. So there are multiple proposals basically pertaining to this. There's no consensus. There's no one proposal that has come up. One of the proposals mentioned is that Zavi proposed several solutions, including forbidding block timestamps from decreasing. So one proposal is that block timestamps can never decrease. 2 will always need to have a timestamp greater than 1. 3 will always need to have a timestamp greater than 2. 4 will always need to have a timestamp greater than 3. 5 will always need to have a timestamp greater than 6. 7 will need to have a timestamp greater than 6. 8 will need to have a timestamp greater than 8, and so on and so forth. So this way you cannot manipulate the timestamps. Like we can see that 7th is it's getting mined, has a timestamp less than 6. So we come up with a proposal. Okay, this is just in the brainstorming stages. Okay, this is not a bit, this is not a soft fork. Nothing is proposed. It's just a discussion that going on, that how can we solve this on the mainnet. This is not the threat. Okay, so that is, this is not an SOS situation, because pulling this off on mainnet is very difficult, very difficult. Okay, so this can only be pulled off theoretically on the test net, and that is why this is not an SOS situation. So the community is open to suggestions. So one suggestion that has been given is that timestamps should always increment, they should never decrement, or at least forbidding them from decreasing more than 2 hours, or at the most 2 hours they can decrement, not more than that. Not more than that. So these are some of the mitigation that have been proposed. We just read the text to wrap it off, because it's already 9:10. To reduce difficulty by 1/4 in the retarget period, the attacking miners need to set the time of the retarget blocks to 8 weeks further in the future, as I mentioned, than the block at the start of the current period. To do this twice in a row at the start of the attack requires eventually setting some blocks time 16 weeks into the future. Okay, so the first difficulty time adjustment will be 8 weeks, the second will be 16 weeks, 8 plus 8, and they'll not broadcast it for 16 weeks. So he'll mine blocks worth 16 weeks, but he'll not broadcast it. He'll broadcast it after 16 weeks all of a sudden. Full nodes will not accept blocks more than 2 hours, as we said, because if you put a timestamp of 16 weeks, full nodes are not going to accept it. So you can't broadcast it till 16 weeks. Preventing the malicious blocks from being accepted for 8 weeks for the first set of blocks and 16 weeks for the second set of blocks. While the attacking miners wait for their blocks to be accepted. So this fellow will wait for 16 weeks till he broadcasts the blockchain. They can create additional blocks at ever lower difficulties. Any blocks created by honest miners during the 16 weeks that attackers are preparing, their attack will be reorganized. So when this fellow is hiding his chain, he's not broadcasting his chain for 16 weeks. Obviously, honest miners will continue mining. After 16 weeks, when he broadcasts his chain, because he has 51% of the hash rate, now we have two competing chains, the chain of the honest miners and the chain of this time warp attacker. The nodes will follow the chain of this time warp attacker because it has 51% of the hash rate, and the blocks that have been mined by the honest nodes will get reorged by after 16 weeks. This could mark every transaction confirmed during that time as either unconfirmed or invalid, conflicted on the current chain. Ohad suggests solving the attack with a soft fork that requires the timestamp of the last block in a retarget period be greater than the timestamp of the block in that period. Ohad suggests solving the attack with a soft fork that requires a timestamp of the last block in a retarget period to be greater than the timestamp of the first block in that period. This you already have, right? Zavi proposed several solutions, including forbidding block timestamps from decreasing, which could create problems. Some miners create blocks near the 2-hour future limit enforced by nodes, or at least forbidding them from decreasing by more than about 2 hours. So below is just a summary of what we've covered. This is the new time warp attack. I hope I was able to explain how this time warp attack happens. Here we put the timestamp in the final block 8 weeks in the advance. Here we put 16 weeks in the advance, okay? And we don't broadcast the chain for 16 weeks. And after 16 weeks, we broadcast our chain, so that because we have 51% of the hash rate, the honest miners chain gets reorged and our chain gets followed by all the nodes. What is the mitigation? One of the proposed mitigations is that block times should only increase. So it will not be possible for any block to have a time timestamp in the past, or at the most we can do a relaxation and allow one block to have a timestamp 2 hours before the previous timestamp. Okay, so 7 can have a timestamp before 6, but not more than 2 hours. Can't have 2 weeks. And 8 can have a timestamp before 9, but not more than 2 hours, so on and so forth. So this is one mitigation. In this situation, like time block 4 will not be able to have a timestamp 8 weeks before 5. Okay, it can only have a timestamp maximum 2 hours in approximation to 5. That is one of the mitigation that is being proposed, and the various proposals are still being considered. So we covered what a time warp attack is, what a classic time warp attack is, what its mitigation is, what a new time warp attack is, and what its proposed mitigation is. And because there was so much of discussion, we will not be able to cover anything else from the newsletter. Anybody who is interested can go through the newsletter on their own. If you have any questions, any difficulties in trying to understand anything in the newsletter, please feel free to post either in the Discord threads, or you can DM me, whatever suits you. I will stop sharing my screen, and if there are any questions, please let me know. There is something in the chat. Not possible, selfish mining attack, not possible, got to go. Why do we increase the difficulty in the third period? This is a scenario that the attacker has created. This is a scenario that the attacker has created. I rationally was not able to comprehend why he does that. Okay, because if you see merge, and let me share my screen again for a second. That's a very nice question. That that is an imagination that he came up with, and the reason is not mentioned. Might be mentioned in the research paper that he's shared, or might be the reason not to make it very obvious. If the difficulty is reducing by 1/4, and then it is reducing again by 1/4, and then it is increasing by 4x, then it becomes pretty difficult for somebody with the naked eye to analyze that a time warp attack is being pulled. If it's decreasing 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, then it becomes pretty obvious that somebody's pulling off a time warp attack. So one reason that I can think about, even though it's not mentioned, could be that so that he does not make this attack very obvious. Okay, so when you see that the difficulty is fluctuating, after 2016 blocks, it goes down. After 2016 blocks, it goes down. After 2016 blocks, it goes up again. Okay, so it the pattern becomes pretty ambiguous. You know, it's not very evident that somebody's pulling a time warp attack, because hey, look, the difficulty is even going up. So it does not become that evident. Whereas if it's going down and down and down and down, there is a high possibility of assuming that a time warp attack could be pulled off. That could be one of the reasons. And I think let me see. Merch also, he did not refer to the time warp attack suggested by the author. So the author who proposed this was Davi. And Merch came up with his own time warp attack, in which he said exactly what Coding P is saying. And he assumed that with this time warp attack, we will keep on decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And after every difficulty adjustment algorithm, we will keep on decreasing it till we reach a point where we can mine 6 blocks in 1 second. So we'll completely crash the difficulty, and that is a possibility. Like Coding P said, why do we have to increase it? We can just keep on decreasing, decreasing, decreasing till we reach a point that the difficulty comes to the bare minimum, and we are able to mine 6 blocks in 1 second. That's absolutely possible. But I think the author increases it after 2 epochs. Maybe my assumption is to not make it very obvious that the system is being attacked, and to deceive the people who are looking with a naked eye, to also occasionally increase it. This is my hunch, but it is not mentioned anywhere here. But again, the merch also goes on to do what Coding P said, that we don't have to necessarily increase it. It's just an assumption that the author has made. That is my hunch on it. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen. Anything else?
Yeah, one question I had was that the solution was that every chain tip or every block needs to have a timestamp greater than the previous block, right? With the exception of one block, right? Only one block is allowed to have a timestamp which is lesser than the previous block. Is that the
No,
case?
there are two proposed solutions. One solution is that every single block on the time chain or the blockchain must have a timestamp greater than the previous block. That is like the strict rule. Okay. So every block that is mined needs to have a timestamp greater than the previous block, but that is not practical. So we can relax it a little. What's the relaxation? Every single block that is mined on the blockchain can have a timestamp before the timestamp of the previous block, but not more than 2 hours. So if I'm mining block number 100, it can have a timestamp lesser than the timestamp of block number 99, but not less than 2 hours. Not 8 weeks in the past, not 2 weeks in the past, just 2 hours maximum. That's a practical scenario. So we completely rule out a time warp attack.
Right. But just a very basic question that why does that even need to exist? That why would block X have a timestamp less than block X minus 1 in any scenario?
Uh, it might be due to various reasons. It might be due to your local computer's time. Your local computers time differ. Unix epoch time it
Right.
differs. If that could be one reason. Broadcasting might take time if you have low latency. And the timestamp, basically the timestamp is when you start hashing the block. Okay. When you start hashing the block, it's not when you find the block. When you're hashing the block, you enter a timestamp and then you start hashing the block.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so
It's not
it might
when
be
you
sometimes yeah.
find the correct block hash, the valid block hash, which
Right. The timestamp needs to be there in the block when you start hashing the block.
right, makes sense, yes.
Coding tree part of the article. Currently, it will absolutely not be possible because that will take a lot of time. If you are interested, then let me see if we can move it to next week, or if something is possible, or if you and I can come 10 minutes before time last week, next week, or whatever. I'll let you know if that will be possible. Right now, it will not be possible because even I have appointments and others have appointments. So excuse me. But yeah, if you're interested in knowing, then and I'll let you know how is that possible. If next week, if the newsletter next week is not very vast and expansive and it doesn't have a lot of interesting articles, maybe we can cover it for you because you're a regular participant. And if that's not possible, then you and I can probably join for 10 minutes and I can try and explain it to you. All right. Yeah, Mango, welcome back. Would you like to know what a median is? Did you understand before you left what median time is, or
I did a search later. I found out.
you found
It's
out, right? Explain.
putting the numbers in series and the middle of that, right?
Right. So if we consider the previous 11 blocks, the middle block is 6th block. So any block that is mined on the Bitcoin blockchain cannot have a timestamp which is lesser than the median time pass of the past 11 blocks. So if I'm mining block number 106, the timestamp on block number 106 cannot be lesser than the timestamp on block number 100, the sixth previous block. It has to be at least 1 second greater than that.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.